started with the automated telephone time service in Butte, Montana. I know how that sounds. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, or the kind of story you tell to kill time on a long dark drive. But it wasn't a joke. It was the first thread, and when I pulled it, my whole life began to unravel. My name is Mark. Or at least it was. I think it still is. I have to keep saying it to myself now, a low whisper under my breath. Mark? Mark. My name is Mark. It feels less like a name and more like a word in a language I'm slowly forgetting. This was last October. I was in Butte for a work conference, the kind of corporate soul crusher that makes you question all your life choices. I'm a project manager for a logistics software firm. It's as exciting as it sounds. The conference was at the Copper King Hotel, a place that tried way too hard to be grand and just ended up feeling heavy, like the ornate, dark wood paneling was slowly pressing in on you. I wasn't alone. Chloe was with me. Chloe from marketing. We'd been dancing around this thing for months. Flirtatious emails that lingered a little too long, accidental touches in the break room that weren't accidental at all, a shared look during a mind-numbingly boring presentation that felt like a secret conversation. This trip was the first time we'd been away from the office together, and the unspoken tension was a live wire in the air between us. She was sharing a room with a colleague from the Denver office, and I had my own, but the plan, the beautiful, terrifying plan, was that she'd find a reason to come to my room after the first day's sessions. I remember watching her during the final keynote. She was sitting 2 rows ahead of me, and I wasn't listening to a word the speaker was saying. I was fixated on the nape of her neck, where a few stray strands of her dark, wavy hair had escaped her ponytail and curled against her skin. She was wearing a simple navy blue blouse and a black pencil skirt, and when she shifted in her seat, crossing her legs, the fabric of the skirt pulled tight across her thighs. I could see the line of her calf muscle, tense and defined in her heels. I had a sudden vivid image of my hand on that calf, my thumb tracing the curve of her ankle, the strap of her shoe digging into the delicate skin. The thought was so sharp, so inappropriate for the setting, that I felt a flush of heat and had to look down at my notepad, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. This was the night it was finally going to happen. The session ended in a wave of polite applause. We filed out into the lobby, a river of suits and name tags. Chloe caught my eye and gave me a small, private smile, a quick flutter of her fingers. Soon. It said. My mouth went dry. Gonna go dump my bag, I said, my voice a little too loud. Maybe grab a drink at the bar later? Sounds perfect, she said, her voice smooth as honey. I just need to check in with Sarah. See you in an hour? I nodded, my throat tight. I watched her walk away, the sway of her hips in that skirt a hypnotic rhythm. I was so consumed by it, by the promise in that sway, that I barely noticed the man until I'd almost walked right into him. He was just standing there. In the middle of the bustling lobby. He was a statue, tall, gaunt, dressed in a dark, old-fashioned suit that looked like it belonged in a different century. His hair was silver, slicked back from a high forehead, and his skin was pale, almost waxy. But it was his eyes that stopped me dead. They were a flat, milky blue, and they were fixed directly on me, not in a curious way, or an angry way. It was a vacant, cataloging stare, like he was an archivist and I was a document. He was memorizing. Excuse me, I mumbled, sidestepping him. He didn't reply. He didn't even blink. He just kept staring as I moved past him, his head turning slightly to track my progress toward the elevators. The back of my neck prickled. I jabbed the elevator button, feeling an irrational urge to get out of his line of sight. When the doors slid open, I hurried inside and turned around. He was still watching me, a faint, unreadable smile now touching his lips. Then the doors closed and he was gone. I shook it off in the elevator, just a weird guy. Butte was a weird town, all old mining history and stark, mountainous landscapes. It probably had its share of local characters. I got to my room on the 4th floor, dumped my laptop bag on the bed, and tried to calm my racing heart. It was just the combination of the creepy guy and the anticipation of seeing Chloe. That was all. I decided to kill time by calling the official U.S. time service. It's a weird habit I have. I like the precision of it, the robotic, unassailable truth of it. I dialed the number on my cell, 303499711, a number I know by heart. A crisp, female automated voice came on the line. At the tone, the time will be 6:42 and 10 seconds. Mountain Daylight Time. Star. A beep. Standard that I was about to hang up when the voice continued, its cadence unchanged. Asterisk, the next tone will mark 86,400 seconds, until subject designation. Mark, experiences nominal dissolution. Asterisk, a cold knot tightened in my stomach that I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. What the hell was that? A glitch? Some kind of prank recording? I put the phone back to my ear, but the line was dead that I redialed. Asterisk, at the tone the time will be 6:42 and 40 seconds. Mountain Daylight Time. Asterisk beep. Then silence, just the faint hum of the open line. I stood there in the quiet of my hotel room, the earlier encounter with the gaunt man now feeling less like a coincidence and more like the first drop of rain before a storm. Asterisk nominal dissolution. Asterisk the words echoed in my head, they sounded clinical, terrifying, and it had used my name. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. I fumbled with my phone, my hands suddenly clumsy. It was Chloe. She'd changed out of her work clothes and into a simple black dress that clung to her in a way that made it hard to breathe. It was sleeveless, and the smooth skin of her shoulders and arms looked soft in the dim hallway light. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her face. She'd reapplied her lipstick, a deep, glossy red. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her smile fading into a look of concern. No, it's nothing, I said, forcing a laugh. I stepped back to let her in. The scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive, filled the room. Just a weird phone call. She walked past me, her bare arm brushing against mine, sending a jolt through me. She looked around the room, her eyes taking in the generic hotel art, the heavy curtains, the king-sized bed. Her gaze lingered on the bed for a fraction of a second too long, and I felt that familiar, desperate heat again. Weird how? She asked, turning back to me. I didn't want to tell her it sounded insane. I didn't want to be the weird, paranoid guy right before we were about to, so I deflected. Just a wrong number? You ready for that drink? The hotel bar was all dark leather and low lighting. We found a booth in the back, away from a few other scattered conference attendees. We ordered old fashions. Our knees touched under the small table, and neither of us moved away. The contact was electric. I was hyper-aware of every little thing about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the shape of her mouth as she took a sip of her drink, the way the neckline of her dress gaped slightly when she leaned forward, giving me a tantalizing hint of the curve of her breasts. We talked about work, about stupid office politics, but it was all just foreplay. The real conversation was happening in the spaces between the words, in the way she held my gaze a little too long, in the way her foot, now free of its heel, brushed against my ankle under the table. The memory of the time service and the gaunt man receded, pushed back by the sheer, overwhelming physicality of her presence. I've been thinking about this for a long time, Mark, she said, her voice low. Me too, Chloe. That is so long. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cool and slender in mine. I ran my thumb over her knuckles, and I saw a shiver go through her. The desire was a thick, heavy fog in my brain, smothering the prickle of fear. This was what was real, this was what mattered. And then I saw him. He was sitting at the bar, his back to us, but I knew it was him. The same dark, anachronistic suit, the same silver-slicked hair. He was nursing a glass of clear liquid, no ice, and he was perfectly still. He wasn't talking to the bartender. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was just there. What is it? Chloe asked, following my gaze. That guy, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. At the bar. He was in the lobby earlier. He just stared at me. Chloe squinted. The one in the weird suit? He looks like an undertaker. She shrugged, taking another sip of her drink. Probably just some old local. Butte's full of history. Maybe he's part of a reenactment or something. She was being logical. Reasonable, but the logic didn't touch the cold dread that was seeping back into my veins. Why was he here? In this bar? It couldn't be a coincidence. As if on cue, the man turned his head, not his whole body, just his head, a slow mechanical rotation until those milky blue eyes were once again locked on me. The faint smile was back. He lifted his glass in a slow, deliberate mock toast. I looked away quickly, my heart thudding against my ribs. Let's get out of here, I said to Chloe, my voice tight. Her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion and maybe a little hurt. What? What? We just got our drinks. I need some air. Let's go up to my room. I was already sliding out of the booth, throwing a couple of 20s on the table. She hesitated for a second, then nodded, a concerned frown on her face. Okay, sure. I didn't look back at the bar as we left. That I could feel his gaze on my back, a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. The elevator ride up was silent. The earlier sexual tension had been fractured, replaced by my obvious anxiety. Chloe stood beside me, her arms crossed, looking at her own reflection in the brass doors. In my room, I went straight to the minibar and poured myself a scotch from a tiny bottle, downing it in one burning gulp. Mark, you're starting to scare me, Chloe said, standing by the bed. What is going on? Was it that guy? It's not just him, I said, the scotch giving me a fleeting burst of courage. That I told her about the phone call, the time service, the voice saying those words, nominal dissolution. She listened, her expression shifting from concern to outright skepticism. Mark, that's crazy. That IT was probably just a crossed line. Some ham radio operator messing around. You know that number isn't secure. It said my name, Chloe. A lucky guess. A coincidence. She came over to me and put a hand on my arm. Her touch was warm, grounding. You're stressed from the conference, and we're both a little wound up. She was right. She had to be right. That I looked down at her. The fear and the desire were getting all mixed up inside me, a toxic, confusing cocktail. My eyes dropped to the neckline of her dress again, to the smooth expanse of her chest. That I wanted to lose myself in her, to use the sheer physical reality of her body to drive out the phantom fears. Forget about it, she whispered, stepping closer. Her body was almost touching mine. Let's just forget about all of it. She leaned in and kissed me. That IT was deep and hungry, full of all the months of pent-up longing. My hands went to her hips, pulling her tight against me. That I could feel the curve of her waist, the firm swell of her ass through the thin fabric of her dress. The fear didn't disappear, but it was submerged, drowned out by a roaring wave of lust. We fell onto the bed in a tangle of limbs and frantic hands. That I kissed her neck, her shoulders, my hands sliding up her thighs, pushing her dress up around her waist. She was wearing black lace underwear. That I remember the contrast of the dark lace against her pale skin, the delicate strap of her thong cutting between the curves of her ass. That IT was all so vivid, so intensely real. Her back arched, and she let out a soft moan as my mouth found her breast through the fabric of her dress. This was working. This was drowning out the noise. That I was focused on the heat of her skin, the taste of her, the sound of her breathing. I was fumbling with my belt when my phone, on the nightstand, buzzed. We both ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Not a call. A rapid-fire series of text messages. Just leave it, Chloe breathed into my ear, her hands pulling at my shirt, but the sound was an insistent drill in my brain. With a frustrated groan, I reached over and grabbed it. The screen was lit up with a string of messages, all from an unknown number. The first was a photo. It was a slightly blurry, off-angle shot of Chloe and me in the bar booth. You could see my tense expression, the way I was gripping my glass. You could see the hint of cleavage I'd been staring at. The second message was just text, 86, 399. The third was another photo. This one was taken from outside the hotel, looking up at my window. Our window. The light was on, the curtains open. You could make out two silhouettes on the bed. I dropped the phone like it was on fire. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. Mark? What is it? Chloe asked, her voice laced with alarm. She sat up, pulling her dress down. I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the phone on the carpet. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. Her face went pale. Oh my God, she whispered. Who is this? I don't know. I choked out. I scrambled off the bed and rushed to the window, yanking the curtains closed. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I peered through the gap in the curtains, scanning the street below. It was dark, mostly deserted. I couldn't see anyone. We have to call the police, Chloe said, her voice shaking. She was already holding her own phone. And tell them what? I said, turning to face her. The mood was utterly shattered. She looked vulnerable now, scared, her lipstick smeared, her hair a mess. The sight of her, which moments before had been the focus of all my desire, now filled me with a protective, sickening dread that I had dragged her into this. That we got some creepy texts? They'll say it's a prank, that they'll ask what we were doing. It's our word against nothing. The photos, Mark. He's watching us. 86-399. The number from the time service.it was a countdown to a what? Nominal dissolution. Forgetting my name? The absurdity of it was somehow the most terrifying part. My phone buzzed again in Chloe's hand. She flinched and looked at the screen, her breath hitched. What? I demanded. She turned the screen to me. It was a new message. Asterisk, the product of fear and desire is a fascinating catalyst that don't stop on my account. Asterisk, I felt vomit rise in my throat. That he wasn't just watching, that he was commenting, that he was inside our heads, twisting the most intimate moment into something grotesque. I can't stay here, Chloe said, her voice small and frightened. She stood up, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. I'm going back to my room. I'm locking the door. Chloe, wait, don't go out there alone. What choice do I have, Mark? There were tears in her eyes now. I'm not safe here. He's targeting you, but he's using me to do it. She was right. The text proved it, that he knew she was my vulnerability. My desire for her was the lever he was using to pry me open. She left quickly, not letting me stop her. The door clicked shut, and I was alone in the silent room. The silence was different now. It was a listening silence. I grabbed my phone and called the time service again, my fingers stabbing at the screen. Asterisk, at the tone, the time will be 9:18 and 5 seconds. Mountain Daylight Time. Asterisk, beep. A pause. My knuckles were white where I gripped the phone. Asterisk, the next tone will mark 85,212 seconds, until subject designation. Mark experiences nominal dissolution. Asterisk, it had changed. The countdown was progressing. It was real. I spent the next hour in a state of paralyzed terror.